There is a folder on my phone that I hoped I would never have to open. It sits 4 layers deep, buried beneath other folders, hidden the way you hide something you are not sure you will ever be ready to use. I labeled it simply, Evidence. For 3 years, I collected what was inside it quietly, one document at a time, telling myself it was just a precaution, telling myself things would never go that far. I was wrong about that. Because on the afternoon of Mother's Day, my mother stood up in front of 52 members of our family, sent every single one of them an itemized spreadsheet of every dollar she claimed to have spent raising me over 29 years, hung a framed printed copy above the fireplace like a trophy, and called me a disappointment in front of everyone I had ever known. She thought I would crumble. She had no idea what was sitting in that folder. My name is Sophia Calloway. I am 29 years old, and I work as a senior financial analyst at a mid-sized firm in Philadelphia. I live in a 650-square-foot apartment in Fishtown. Nothing fancy, no doorman, no granite countertops, but every dollar of rent I pay on the first of each month comes from me and no one else. I have been completely self-sufficient since I was 22, and I never once asked my family to cover a single bill. I work with numbers because numbers are honest in a way that people rarely are. They do not shift the story depending on who is in the room. They do not smile at you on Sunday and undermine you on Monday. They simply tell the truth. The people in my life, particularly the ones who were supposed to love me most, never quite managed that. The one exception was Daniel, my boyfriend of 2 years. Steady, patient, the kind of person who does not try to fix everything, but makes sure you know you are not alone. He was the only one who ever saw the full picture of what my family was, and loved me anyway. My older sister Natalie is 3 years ahead of me, and, in our parents' eyes, approximately a lifetime ahead of me in every way that matters to them. When she made partner at her law firm, our parents flew in, booked 3 tables at a downtown restaurant, and toasted her with champagne until midnight. When I graduated summa cum laude from Temple University, my mother sent me a text. 3 weeks after the ceremony. No exclamation point. When our parents gave Natalie $85,000 toward the down payment on her colonial home in Princeton, I learned about it from her Instagram post. I liked the photo. You learn to do things like that when the alternative is feeling the full weight of what it means. The moment I think about most often happened on an unremarkable Tuesday afternoon. I had just been promoted to senior analyst, something I had worked toward for 3 years, and I called my mother because some part of me still believed that might matter to her. My heart was going faster than I wanted to admit when she picked up. She listened. 3 seconds of silence followed. Then, "That's nice. Natalie won $1 million case yesterday. I'm right in the middle of cooking dinner for her celebration." The line went dead. Daniel came in from the kitchen with a dish towel over his shoulder and looked at my face. "What did she say?" I put the phone face down on the table. "Nothing," I told him. It was nothing. I had said those exact words enough times that they no longer felt like a lie. They just felt like the only available answer. What I did not tell him that night was that 3 years earlier, I had seen something I was never meant to see, and I had been carrying it ever since. I did not go looking for it. It simply appeared in front of me, the way certain truths do, quietly, without warning, impossible to unsee. I took a screenshot. I buried it in that folder. And I told myself, for 3 years, that I would never need to use it. Some truths, though, refused to stay buried forever, and my mother was about to make sure I had no choice left at all. I should have seen it coming. When my mother announced the biggest family gathering she had ever organized, 52 people, Mother's Day weekend, all the way from New York down to Georgia, something in the back of my mind whispered that this was not about celebration. I ignored it. That was my first mistake. She sent the message to the family group chat on a Thursday evening. "It's been too long since we've all been together. Let's make this Mother's Day one we'll never forget." 2 days later, Natalie called me, her voice soft and sweet the way it always was when she needed something. "You're coming early to help set up, right?" "Like we always do?" "Like we always do." That phrase did a lot of heavy lifting. What it actually meant was that I would arrive before sunrise, cook, clean, and arrange everything, while Natalie showed up at noon with a $200 bottle of wine and a smile ready for photographs. I said yes, I hung up. Then I opened my phone, navigated 4 folders deep, and stared at the folder labeled Evidence for about 3 seconds. Then I closed it and went to bed. I pulled into the gravel driveway of Grandma Catherine's farmhouse in upstate New York at 6:30 in the morning. The sun had barely cleared the tree line. White mist still clung to the grass, and the air smelled like damp earth and old pine. The house itself was beautiful, in the way that things can be beautiful without ever feeling warm. White clapboard siding, a wraparound porch, blue shutters framing every window. I had been coming here my whole life and never once felt like I fully belonged inside it. I spent the next 4 hours in the kitchen and the dining room, cooking, cleaning, setting 52 place settings with the good china, arranging flowers on every table. No one helped. No one asked if I needed anything. Natalie arrived at 11:45 in a cream-colored dress, holding a bouquet of peonies that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. Diane met her at the door with both arms open, kissed her on both cheeks, and said how wonderful everything looked. She swept her eyes around the room I had spent the morning preparing and said, "Everything looks just perfect." She did not look at me when she said it. During the family photo on the front steps, Diane arranged everyone with the practiced confidence of someone who had done this 100 times. She placed Natalie right beside her at the center. When I stepped forward to join them, my mother glanced at me and said, "Sophia, honey, stand in the back row. You're taller, you'll block everyone." I stepped back. I smiled the kind of smile you paste on when you have been doing it so long it no longer requires any effort. That was when I felt a hand on my arm. Firm, deliberate, unmistakable. Grandma Catherine, 80 years old and sharper than anyone gave her credit for, leaned close and spoke just loud enough for me to hear. "Whatever happens today, don't you run. You stand your ground." I wanted to ask her what she meant, but Diane was already calling everyone inside, and the moment passed. After lunch, the toasts began. Uncle Frank raised his glass and called my mother the heart of the family. Aunt Susan wiped tears from her eyes, talking about sacrifice and unconditional love. One after another, relatives stood and offered words of admiration, and Diane received every one of them with gracious, practiced humility. Then she rose from her chair, smoothed the front of her lavender dress, and let the room go quiet around her. "Being a mother," she began, her voice carrying that warm, performance-ready tone I had heard my entire life, "is the greatest gift in the world. But it also comes with a cost that most people never see." She paused. "I have 2 daughters, 2 very different daughters, one who has made me proud every single day." Her eyes moved across the table and landed on me. "And one who has tested every limit of my love." Before anyone could react, she reached for her phone, and her thumb moved across the screen. 52 devices lit up and buzzed simultaneously, a wave of notification sounds spreading through the room like dominoes falling. The subject line of the email read, "The cost of raising a disappointment." Inside was a spreadsheet, 29 years of my existence reduced to line items. Hospital delivery, $13,500. Diapers, $3,100. Braces, $8,500. First car, $13,000. College room and board, $51,000. The total at the bottom read, $378,000. Then Diane reached beneath her chair and lifted a gilded frame. Inside it was a printed copy of that spreadsheet. She walked to the fireplace and hung it on the wall beside the family portrait. "So we never forget," she said, turning back to face me, and the room fell into a silence that was waiting for me to break. 52 pairs of eyes settled on me. I could feel each one like a degree of heat. My hands were supposed to be shaking. They were not. I looked at Daniel across the table. He gave me the smallest, steadiest nod I have ever seen. I looked at Grandma Catherine. She sat with her spine perfectly straight, hands folded in her lap, and she dipped her chin once, slowly, like a signal. I had been carrying 3 years of documentation buried 4 folders deep on my phone, telling myself I would never need it. My mother had just given me permission to use every single file. I stood up. "Mom," I said, and my voice came out calm and clear in a way that surprised even me. "Since we're sharing numbers today, I have some numbers of my own." Diane's expression flickered for just a fraction of a second. Sophia, don't make a scene. I looked at her steadily. I'm not making a scene, I said. I'm doing accounting. I opened my phone, found the folder, attached all 3 files to a single email, selected every contact in the family group, and pressed send. 52 phones went off at once, one after another, a cascade of alerts that filled the dining room like an alarm that could not be turned off. The room that had been waiting for me to fall apart was about to learn something important. I was done falling. Do you know what it feels like when an entire room holds its breath at the same moment? I do. I was standing in the middle of it, and I was not even close to finished. The first file was about money. Specifically, money that was supposed to be mine. When my grandparents, Catherine and George, set up education trusts for their grandchildren, they did it equally. $92,000 for Natalie, $92,000 for me. Same amount, same conditions, same intention. Natalie used every penny of hers. She walked across the graduation stage without owing a single dollar to anyone. I graduated from Temple University carrying $71,000 in student loan debt, and I am still paying it back every single month. My mother told me my fund had been used up over the years. Tutoring costs, summer programs, things I needed growing up. I believed her. She was my mother. I was not supposed to need proof. But I work in finance, and eventually, I started looking at the actual numbers. What I found was a wire transfer, dated August 17, 2017. The full $92,000 moved out of my education trust and directly into a personal account belonging to Diane Calloway. 9 days later, she purchased a Range Rover Sport. Cash. I held up the bank statement so the room could see it clearly, and the silence that followed was the kind that has weight to it. Uncle Harold, who spent 30 years as a certified accountant before he retired, was the first to speak. He looked directly at my mother and said, "Can you explain this transfer, Diane?" She straightened in her chair. "That was family money. I used it for the family." Harold did not blink. $92,000 on a Range Rover is family money? He sat back down, his face completely still. My father Robert had been quiet until that moment. He rose from his seat slowly, the way a person does when they are trying very hard to stay in control of themselves, and his voice came out low and measured. "Diane, is this real?" She started to answer. "Robert, you don't understand the full picture." He cut her off. "Then explain it to me." He did not sit back down. The second file was about taxes. From 2019 through 2025, my mother claimed me as a dependent on her federal tax returns. 6 consecutive years. I was 23 years old in 2019. I had my own apartment in Fishtown, my own health insurance, my own everything. I had not been anyone's dependent since I was 21. Each year she collected between $4,500 and $6,000 in federal tax benefits using my Social Security number. The total came to approximately $34,000. I spent $3,800 of my own money hiring a CPA to clean up the damage, and 6 months on the phone with the IRS untangling a mess I never made. "This is not my opinion," I said to the room. "This is federal law." Harold tapped the table once with 2 fingers and said, "Diane, that is a criminal offense." Nobody in that room disagreed. The third file was the one that changed the temperature of the room entirely. When I applied for my first apartment after graduation, I was turned down. The landlord told me my credit score was 490. I had never missed a payment in my life. I had never opened a credit card, so I pulled my credit report and found 4 accounts opened in my name between 2017 and 2020, none of which I had ever applied for. The combined debt on those cards was $52,000, charged against purchases I had never made, for products I had never held in my hands. Every single billing statement had been mailed to one address, Natalie's, and every delivery had been signed for, by Natalie. I passed one receipt around the table so people could read it themselves. A diamond engagement ring, $9,200, delivered to my sister's home, her signature at the bottom. The room went quiet in a different way this time. Slowly, the way a tide pulls back before something larger arrives, every head turned toward Natalie's left hand. The ring caught the light from the chandelier above the table and scattered it across the ceiling. Natalie's husband Derek stared at his wife's hand for a long moment. Then he pushed back his chair, stood up without a word, and walked out of the room. The front door closed behind him, and the sound of it moved through the silence like something final. Natalie's composure broke completely. Tears came fast and hard. "I didn't know it was illegal," she started. I looked at her steadily. "But you knew it wasn't yours," I said. "You just chose not to ask any more questions than that." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "Mom said it was an emergency. She said you would never find out." I let that sit for a moment before I answered. "An emergency that lasted 4 years," I said. "Apparently buying designer bags counts as a crisis. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong, because my mother still had one card left to play, and she had no idea that I had been holding that same card in my hand for 3 years. When the room began to shift against her, Diane did what she had always done when she felt the ground moving beneath her feet. She performed. Her shoulders began to shake. Her hand pressed flat against her chest. Tears appeared with the kind of precision that only comes from years of practice. "Everything I have ever done," she said, her voice breaking on cue, "I did for this family. I gave up everything. My whole life." A few relatives hesitated, conditioned by decades of responding to that particular tone. But then something changed. The performance cracked at the edges, and what came through underneath it was not grief. It was calculation. She straightened her spine, stepped closer to me, and her voice dropped into something colder and harder than anything she had shown all afternoon. "You want to keep going with this? Fine. There are things about you, Sophia, that would change everything in this room." She held my gaze like she expected me to flinch. I did not move. "You're right," I said quietly. "There are things I didn't know about myself. At least, not until 3 years ago." That was the first time all day that my mother's face showed something I had never seen on it before. Genuine fear. 3 years earlier, I had been at Natalie's apartment waiting for us to go to dinner together. Natalie stepped out onto the balcony to take a call and left her phone on the kitchen counter. A message came through. I saw my own name in the preview and I was not going to read it, but my name was right there, and something made me look. What I saw stopped me cold. I took a screenshot. I did not tell a single person. For 3 years, every time my mother insulted me at a holiday dinner, every time she compared me to Natalie in front of a room full of people, every time I swallowed something that should have broken me, I thought about that file sitting 4 folders deep on my phone, and I chose silence. I kept choosing it because I told myself maybe she had a reason. Maybe she was afraid. I gave her 3 years of grace she never once earned. "Mom," I said, and my voice was the steadiest it had been all day. "I did not come here today planning to do this. But you chose this room. You invited every single one of these people. You sent that spreadsheet. You hung it on the wall." I opened the email, attached the screenshot, selected all 52 contacts, and pressed send for the last time. Every phone in the room went off at once. The message on their screens was a text my mother had sent to Natalie on September 22, 2022. It read, "Sophia is not Robert's biological daughter. Do not tell anyone. If he finds out, he will leave me, and I will lose everything." The room went completely silent. 3 full seconds passed, and then it broke open, like something that had been under pressure for a very long time. Aunt Susan covered her mouth with both hands. Uncle Harold sat back in his chair as if the air had gone out of him. Someone dropped a phone, and nobody reached to pick it up. Robert stood slowly, the color completely gone from his face, and looked at my mother the way a person looks at something they are trying to understand but cannot. "Diane," he said. Just her name, nothing else. She started toward him. "Robert, let me explain." He raised one hand, palm out, and she stopped. He did not say another word. He walked to the door with the measured steps of a man holding himself together by sheer will, and then he was gone. The front door closed. A car engine turned over. Tires moved across gravel, and then the sound faded into the late afternoon quiet. Grandma Catherine had not moved from her chair through any of it. Now she looked at her daughter with an expression I had never seen on her face in 80 years of knowing her. Not anger. Something deeper and more permanent than anger. "I suspected for a long time," she said. her voice low and even. "The way you treated that child. I never understood it. Now I do." Diane said, "Mama," and Catherine spoke over her, without raising her voice. 29 years. You lied to me. You lied to Robert. And you lied to that girl every single day by making her believe she was not enough." Then she turned away, and that was the end of it. I walked outside into the early evening air. The sun was low, throwing long shadows across the lawn, and the temperature had dropped just enough to feel like something had shifted in the world. Robert's car was still at the end of the driveway, engine running, going nowhere. I walked over and knocked gently on the passenger window. He did not react at first. Then, slowly, like a man waking up somewhere he did not expect to be, he reached over and unlocked the door. I got in. We sat without speaking for a long moment, engine idling, birds settling into the trees around us, the faint noise from inside the house still reaching us like something from another world. Robert spoke first. 28 years, he said. I changed your diapers. I taught you how to drive. I helped you carry boxes into your dorm room. His voice gave out at the end of that last sentence. I said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry this hurt you. He turned to look at me, eyes red, and shook his head. Don't you dare apologize. You did not do a single thing wrong. He paused. DNA does not erase 28 years. You are my daughter. That is the one thing I am absolutely certain of right now. He pulled me into a hug across the center console, awkward and tight and completely real. Then he let go, put the car in gear, and drove away. I stood at the end of that driveway until his taillights disappeared, and my hands were perfectly still at my sides. The next morning I was leaving Grandma Catherine's house at 9 o'clock, when I found Natalie standing beside my car. No makeup, hair pulled back, eyes swollen from a night of crying. She looked more like herself than she had in years. I know you don't owe me anything, she started. I stopped walking but did not turn around. I know, I said. I was scared, she said. I was scared that if I didn't help her, she would treat me the way she treated you. I turned then, and I looked at my sister, the way I do not think I had ever truly looked at her before. And because you were scared, I said, you let her use my identity. You wore that ring to your own wedding. She did not argue. Tears ran down her face in silence. I can't forgive you today, I told her. Maybe not ever, but I understand why you did it. Fear makes people capable of terrible things. I held her gaze for one more moment. Look at what it made, Mom. We did not hug. We did not make promises. I got in my car and drove away, and for the first time between the two of us, everything that had been said was completely true. I thought the story ended in that driveway. But Grandma Catherine was not finished. And neither, it turned out, was my mother. The morning after Mother's Day, I arrived at Catherine's house at 9 o'clock and found her seated behind her oak desk, with her estate attorney, Thomas Webb, standing beside her. Documents covered every inch of the surface between them. Catherine looked up at me and spoke before I could say a word. I did not block your mother, she said. Blocking her would have been too easy. At 2:17 in the morning, while the rest of the family was still processing what had happened, she had called Thomas and asked him to come over. By the time the sun came up, her will had been rewritten. Diane's share had been reduced from 35% down to 5%. Just enough, Catherine explained, that she could not successfully challenge it in court, on the grounds of being left out entirely. My share had been increased from 10% to 32%. Then Catherine opened the top drawer of her desk and slid a cream-colored envelope across the surface toward me. My name was written on the front in her handwriting. Inside was a check for $55,000 and a handwritten letter. It said, "You have always been the most remarkable person in this family. I am sorry it took me so long to say it out loud. All my love, Grandma Catherine." I had not cried once in 2 days. I cried then, not because I was hurting, but because for the first time in my life, someone who had known me my whole life was finally seeing me clearly. 1 week later, Diane received formal notification of the changes to the will. She called Catherine that same afternoon, her voice moving back and forth between fury and desperation. "Mama, you are being manipulated. That girl planned all of this from the beginning. You have to listen to me," Catherine let her finish. She did not interrupt once. When Diane went quiet, Catherine said 7 words and then hung up the phone. You made your choices, so did I. Diane called back 7 times. Catherine did not answer a single one. Meanwhile, Robert moved out of the house he had shared with Diane for nearly 30 years and went to stay with his brother in Hartford. Divorce papers were filed 8 days later. By midnight, on the day of the gathering, 51 of the 52 family members had cut off contact with my mother. She called person after person, and no one picked up. Aunt Susan sent me a text that I have saved to this day. It read, "I watched what was happening for years, and I said nothing. That is the thing I am most ashamed of." 2 months passed, and the world looked different inside them. My credit score climbed from 490 to 762. My student loan balance dropped to $27,000 after I made a significant payment using part of what Catherine had given me. Daniel and I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in Hoboken, with a kitchen wide enough to actually cook in, and we picked out every piece of furniture together, without asking a single person's opinion. Robert came on moving day with a houseplant and a bottle of red wine, and stayed until 10 o'clock that night, talking about nothing in particular, which was exactly what I needed. Sunday dinners became our tradition. Every Wednesday, Catherine called. She never asked much, and me, that was enough. Then a letter arrived from Tennessee. A man named James, who had matched my DNA through Ancestry DNA and believed he might be my biological father. He was careful and respectful in the way he wrote it, making clear he wanted nothing from me and was not asking to be part of my life. He simply thought I deserved to know he existed. I read the letter 3 times, folded it, and sat with it for a long while. Then I wrote him a short email. I told him I was not ready to talk, but that I appreciated him reaching out without any pressure. I closed the laptop and went back to making dinner. Some answers can wait. I had only just learned that. About 3 weeks after we moved in, I was walking out of my office building on a Tuesday afternoon when I saw her. Diane was standing at the entrance, thinner than I remembered, tired in a way that went beyond sleep. Her clothes were plain. She had been waiting. "You destroyed everything," she said, her voice rough at the edges. I stopped walking and looked at her steadily. "No," I said. "You did that 29 years ago. I just stopped helping you keep it hidden," she said. "I am your mother." I answered her clearly, and without any anger in my voice. "You are the person who stole my education fund, committed tax fraud using my name, and destroyed my credit before I was old enough to defend it. You do not get to stand outside my workplace." I held her gaze for 1 moment longer. "If you cross this line again, the next conversation will not be with me. It will be with the IRS and federal law enforcement. You already have the documentation." Then I walked to my car. My hands were completely still. I pulled out of the parking lot and checked my mirror once. She was still standing there, smaller now, growing smaller, and then the road curved and she was gone. It was the first time in my life that I did not look back twice. 3 weeks after that, Daniel proposed in our kitchen in Hoboken. No restaurant reservation, no flowers arranged in advance. The pasta was still on the stove. He was still wearing the dish towel he had tucked into his waistband. I said yes before he finished the sentence. My mother sent me a bill for $378,000. She listed every diaper, every dental appointment, every birthday cake. But she never once calculated the real cost. 29 years of a person learning to doubt her own worth before she even understood what worth was. There is no line item for that. There is no spreadsheet that captures what it costs a child to grow up believing she is the problem. I am Sophia Calloway. I am 29 years old. I work with numbers for a living, and I can tell you with complete certainty that the account is settled. The bill is paid in full,